All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for our second installment of the Congo Chats. We're really excited to be able to have this distinguished panelists that are here. We know all of these individuals, and they all are coming from various backgrounds when it comes to mining, from civil society to the private sector. And so we're very excited to be able to hear and to learn more about what's been happening kind of from the mining perspective, and we will get a lot of different views and angles today. So before we get into it, I want to introduce our panelists, starting off with Eric Mboma. Eric is a Congolese banker and strategist renowned for his expertise in finance, mining, and economic development across the continent. He was born to Congolese parents and educated both in the French and Congolese school systems, and he went on to receive his master in public administration from Harvard University's Kennedy School in 2006 and an MBA in finance strategy and entrepreneurship from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business in 2008. We are so excited to be able to have you, as always, Eric. And then we also have Tomisi Kikama. Tomisi is the co-founder of Ujengo Labs and recently launched a technology and development company that is based in the DRC with partnerships in Kenya and the US and across in Kenya and the US. In addition to Ujengo Labs, Tomisi is also the partner of Okapi Mobile, a technology started by Professor Jean Bele from Boston with a footprint in Kinshasa and future plans to develop manufacturing capabilities in DRC. And I think as of right now is the only Congolese owned mobile end-to-end entity in the form of Okapi Mobile. So we'll get into that, which is very exciting. And then we also have Nicole Namwezi Batumike, who is a gender and responsible sourcing specialist with the Congolese nonprofit Panzi Foundation. And she's been developing Panzi's ethical jewelry brand through its establishment of traceable and inclusive mine-to-market model with local and international partners. And her current role also seeks to address the relationship between structural inequities, conflict-related sexual violence, and mining by collaboration with international stakeholders. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. And then we also have Machayo, who is currently the head of US government and public affairs for Micron Technology. He previously worked in the United States Senate, Loudoun County government, the US African Development Foundation, the White House, and the Department of Homeland Security. Bo graduated from Wake Forest University with degrees in economics and international affairs, and he has a master's in public administration with honors distinction from George Mason University. Thank you, Bo, for joining us today. We're glad to have you. And then last but definitely not least, we have Mr. Yves Mayilamene, who is currently the Regional Human Resource Lead for Copper Africa at Glencore, where since mid-September 2024, he has overseen the HR strategy and talent development for major mining operations in the DRC and beyond. And prior to joining Glencore, he served as the Group Executive Vice President of Human Resources for EcoBank, Transnational Incorporated from 2018, leading transformative talent initiatives that earned the Pan-African Bank recognition as one of the best places to work in Africa. And so he brings today to this conversation his over 25 years of international leadership experience. And he began his career as a graduate trainee at the British American Tobacco in the DRC, and then went on to hold several senior HR roles. So thank you again, all of you, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions that we've prepared for this conversation, wanted to just kind of set the scene in terms of where we're at with mining. As we know, there's been a lot of conversation around critical resources and critical minerals in the Congo, specifically around a US DRC peace deal that is being crafted. And so for some folks who may not be aware and who are joining or watching this webinar for the first time, we know that in this year, obviously the US administration changed, and under the new administration of President Trump has kind of been moving with like a reset and this America First approach. And so, similar to what we've been seeing in Ukraine, there's been a lot of conversation about how to kind of move America's manufacturing capabilities and also America's capabilities to gain access to critical resources around the world, with Congo being another target market. So in January, we saw that USAID and the State Department was essentially eliminated, and that has kind of created some new challenges in Congo. But one of the big things that the Trump administration did say is that they are trying to work on this peace agreement. So in April, there was a statement of principles that was signed by the DRC and Rwanda here in DC. And then also in May, there was a draft peace proposal that was submitted by the DRC and Rwanda to the US, and they're continuing to work on the developing peace agreement. And most recently, we heard from some folks who do have an ear with the US government to get some more kind of information on what this peace agreement is looking like. And I think one misconception that has kind of been touted, or at least verbalized or believed through the Congolese community, is that this peace agreement is going to be bringing U.S. peace reinforcement, specifically to the northeastern region of Congo and the Kivus, around Goma and Bukavu. But from what we know now and what we're hearing is that the U.S. is saying that they're not going to be committing boots on the ground when it comes to instating peace. And a lot of this agreement is really on the DRC's government's kind of onus to be able to establish peace in the East. And a lot of the mining conversations that we're seeing, or this urgency to bring mining to US companies to do mining in Congo, is actually in Katanga. So just wanted to kind of set that stage and give that before we hop into our questions. So we are going to start off with Eric. So Eric, you have had a long time kind of career within financial services and working with financial institutions. So how do Equity Bank and other financial institutions in Congo evaluate mining projects in terms of both its financial viability and also ESG, the environmental, social, and governance, given kind of where we're at with the current state of affairs? And we know that the DRC has set ambitious targets for local mineral processing and smelting. What are the most significant bottlenecks, financial, technical, or infrastructural, to building the domestic supply chain? And how can Congolese mining entities bolster their value chain? So I will pause there. That was kind of a twofold question.
Yes, and it's quite an agenda. But look, the mining industry, and especially in a country like the DRC, if you want to develop projects such as what Yves' company is working on, Glencore, because DRC has giant resources, not big ones, giants. Those are the kind of resources that the biggest companies in the world need. So if you want to develop your project in that space, the span of developing such project could take like 15 years. And this could pour in billions of dollars, so much more than the combined balance sheet of all the banks in the DRC. Just for a single project, it could reach this kind of amounts. What does the current system in the DRC do? So we have like 18 banks in the DRC. Generally, those big projects are not financed directly from the DRC. The capital is raised elsewhere, but obviously the local companies want to participate in all of that. The process of assessment that they go through is going to be relatively classic. They will want to see the future cash flows, have a sense of the size of the resource. A certification of the resource will be needed to have a sense of what's in the ground and what could be the potential that could be explored with time further out. They would want to understand as well if the project is connected to a specific demand or not. So projects that belong to a company that is already operating obviously have a bigger chance and a better chance to be supported among other things. The other aspect is obviously the ESG agenda. We have seen projects in places like Gabon, for instance, and other countries where rivers were polluted because people came, tried to started operating without all the cautionary sort of behaviors and tools they should have had. So to start with, you need to have the right picture of, the location itself. It's going to have the type of operation you should be conducted should imply also obviously having a number of measures to be able at the end of the project or progressively protect the environment that is going to be obviously affected. Communities as well. In some cases, I think I've not been there personally recently, but there were conversations around cities like Kolwezi, where the resource exists even literally under the city of Kolwezi. So what do you do when you find something like that? When you have an opportunity, you need to be able to relocate the population and make sure that people can, go about their lives decently. If they need to be compensated because they have let the land in which they were living, where there were some resources, this has to be done properly and with fair value in mind. So that's also another aspect that a bank will assess or a group of financiers will appreciate to see that not only the project itself has a financial viability, but also the way you will be operating in that space will be according to the main sort of guidelines of the industry, the best practices of the industry. So I don't know if this answers your first question, but that's what I would come up with. I think one of your questions was around the bottlenecks.
Yes.
Of the industry. So the three one that you mentioned were specifically what you have. I will start with infrastructure. When you're in a place like the DRC in Katanga, for instance, it is very different from one of the top producers of copper in the world, Chile. When you're operating a mine in Chile, it's literally on the coastline. So you literally just have to push the raw material down the mountain to the ocean. It's a very difficult. It's a very different conversation in the DRC. Actually, in a place like the DRC, you would need probably the kind of infrastructure you have in Western Australia, where you have hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of railroads that is built because you need to take the extracted resource to the coast. And be able to send it either in the territory, across the nation to the right place where you have all the processing factory, the processing plants, or if it has to be sent to far away from the country, that's also a consideration you need to have. So you need infrastructure. You can't go without heavy, and sometimes it's in billions of dollars. Building a railroad could be a couple of millions of kilometers per kilometer. So it can really, all of this is going to be very capital intensive. And I've not even talked about the deep sea port that you would need to be able to bring all of the raw material at the cost. The strength of a place like the DRC is the quality of our resource, which sort of help mitigate a little bit the cost. The quality of the copper, for instance, in Katanga, for the kind of average I could remember, is going to be around 4% in some of the best cases. But in a place like Chile, it's going to be 0.8%. So DRC is 5 times better. So this compensates more or less the lack of infrastructure, but also builds an investment case for the DRC. We talked about this bottleneck. The second one, and maybe I should talk about the way to mitigate as well further this bottleneck, would be to maybe have some special economic zones where you can have a concentration of investments in a place that could service at the same time the likes of Glencore or Ivano, etc. And I guess it could be, I mean, people could obviously argue and disagree with that plan, but the sort of reconstitution of the sort of railroad between Katanga and the coast in Angola, which name I can't remember at the moment. I
Lobito,
guess you guys,
Lobito Corridor.
Lobito. Lobito corridor, exactly. So that corridor is part of the kind of initiative that could help. Obviously, as a Congolese, I would have wanted this corridor to go through DRC inside the territory. But I guess some economic calculation also should decide what is the long-term value. And actually, when you're looking at this kind of projects from a DRC perspective, we should be trying to see what is the economic impact, the overall economic impact. So is that solution the best for us as mining operators, or are there some alternatives to do something that is more suitable for our country? Is another conversation to be had. We have talked about infrastructure, but if we move to technology, and that's the aspect that came to my mind in the first place when I started hearing about the deal between DRC and the US.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that Congolese universities are at the right level. Technology goes very fast. I mean, things have changed radically over the last couple of decades. The big mining companies are able to operate, especially with artificial intelligence. They've been able to operate and will be able to operate many of those mines with less people. So you don't need you need less of the mining workers that we used to have in the past. What you need today is engineers who can drive with those joysticks the trains that go from one point to the other. On the coast, you need engineers in geophysics, you need engineers in geochemistry, in mining itself, building the mine itself, and so on and so forth. We need to do that because when you look at multiple countries, let's say South Africa, when you have one direct job in the mining space in South Africa, it generates almost 4 to 5 jobs, indirect jobs outside.
Right.
So this comes only because people are prepared to do that. And like I was saying at the beginning of the project, for you to go from exploration to operation, it could take easily 15 years in some cases. That's more than enough time to have trained the right kind of profile if you do it on time, naturally. You could have the right kind of profile to be actually the guys driving these kind of mines. I think we used to have these kind of guys because if you go across the continent in West Africa, in South Africa, you have Congolese operating in those mines. We used to train these people. The question is today, maybe if we let us give more light to that, are we building this kind of resource and profiles for the Congolese economy? But so I would say technology for me is maybe the second piece, and the last one is financial. Maybe it's one of the key one. But yes, like I said, you need a huge balance sheet. We don't usually have that. But I think that the banks themselves, even when they have balance sheets, are struggling to have the expertise inside the banks to understand how a mine is operated. This is a long-term game. And generally, they don't have this kind of engineers on the payroll. And that's, to me, is one aspect that would need to be addressed. Maybe I should stop there to let some of the key panelists talk.
Well, one thing, I know that you're on the run, so I just had one more follow-up question for you. I'm glad that you mentioned Kolwezi. I actually had the opportunity to attend the Katanga business meeting, which was based in Kolwezi. And as we know, that's a very mineral-rich region. And one of the big things that was talked about during the conference was really the need to promote Congolese talent, specifically giving Congolese artisanal miners the opportunity to be able to increase and also grow their production. Obviously, they're not going to be able to do production at the scale of like a Glencore or some of the other entities that are there. But given that, what would you say is needed in terms of from the financial sector in order to be able to help support Congolese entrepreneurs who are in the mining sector and who are looking to be able to position themselves to gain access to capital and financing? Because I know we have probably some people here who are interested in entering into mining and don't know where's the first place that they would even start when it comes to accessing capital or things of those nature.
I think, something I like to do when I'm back home is also to look at those entrepreneurs who are making it. And many of them are not Congolese. And probably that gives them also the opportunity to do their homework at 100%. Because maybe when you're Congolese, you think you know. We have local institutions like ANAPI. We have the Ministry of Mine, and all of those. They have put together some schemes that exist already that should open the door to opportunities in the country to do business. But when I was running a bank in the DRC, what I found is that people would come to me and would consider it as a painful exercise to actually build a business plan. So this seemed to be like something that people are not really interested in doing seriously, but I think that's where you actually, sort of gear up for this adventure. Mining is another game like many other, and there is room there. So I think it's commendable to see people coming in and, getting into the sort of, they provide cooked meals or they would clean the offices, etc. That's good. We need that. But there is room also in the pure mining game at a smaller scale, maybe than what we see the big players do. So I think that coming there with a proper business plan, with a proper governance in place in how you're running your business, with financials that are actually already gradually audited or at least in order, making sure you have an off-taker that is prepared to back you up. All of those would reassure, a bank that you are someone that would be a good bet in that space. I think if you start already with that, I think you're not in a bad place. If you're dealing with, let's say, I'm using Glencore because I know it's a massive company, but I'm sure knowing Yves, he will probably share more than what I'm trying to imagine now. I'm sure they have a specific program where they're trying to fit to create opportunities for local entrepreneurs. But you need to come with a credible conversation to the table because it's a risk they're taking, whether it's the bank following you or the potential client that could be a Glencore or partner. But I'm sure they would love to have more Congolese operating because at the end of the day, it builds some social equity for them vis-a-vis the government and vis-a-vis the local population.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sounds good. Well, if you're still on, we'll come back to you. But thank you so much for those perspectives. And we always love being able to hear more and learn more from your experience in the financial services sector. I'm going to kick it to Yves. So, as the regional HR lead for Glencore, how are you approaching the local workforce development and skills transfer in Congolese mining operations?
Thank you, Nico, and thank you for inviting me today. I was listening to my brother Eric and was, mentioning Glencore. By the way, for Glencore, we take a long-term and sustainable view when it comes to workforce development because I think the investment is quite important, it's quite massive. I think we have one of the largest the biggest operation in DRC with two big companies with a total workforce of about 10,000 people working on different companies with different mines, open pit, underground. We have them with our KCC operation and also with Mutanda mining. So our approach is mainly rooted in trying to build capacity from within. So this is very important. So we start, I will say, with some targeted technical training for our people. So we have developed in all our center, in our mine companies, some technical centers where we try to train our people to use the latest technology that we are bringing on the ground for both mining extraction, for mining processing, and also in the full supply chain, export and vice versa, because it's a full ecosystem that we use. We also partner with some local institutions for those who have been in the Katanga region, you have places like Mutoshi and those technical schools to try to help them align some of the education to the needs that we have. So we have technicians, we have operators working on the mine that are coming actually for those schools. We provide internships, so the best students come to join us. We also focus very much on the job learning, putting in place some kind of mentoring, putting a framework where Congolese can have, how can I put it, can gain practical exposure on the critical role. And that is important mainly for the mid-management and moving forward. And for more senior and technical position, we have a kind of formal, kind of technical knowledge transfer mechanism. We recruit a lot of expatriates, but all of them has a 2 years contract with a mandate to make sure that at the end of the stay, they have somebody that have been prepared. On top of that, I've also tried to institutionalize and formalize a kind of talent management framework where we identify high potential Congolese. We try to expose them on the best practice. We are also leveraging on the fact that Glencore is being a global company. So we try to expose our Congolese high-profile talent to South Africa, to South America, where they can get exposure on the best practice and then come back to take high responsibilities. So this is how we try to push our agenda to make sure that the people that we have on the ground, the people that are working for us, on top of the technology in terms of knowledge, and also making sure that they are running the business efficiently and profitably. So this is our approach. I would say just...
Thank you for that. I'm going to kick it over to Nicole. Want to hear a little bit about civil society. So Nicole, we know that you work with Panzi, and Panzi is primarily located in the northeastern province, the northeastern Kivu province in Congo, and has been doing a lot of work around sexual violence, but also around community health. And with your role, especially being involved in looking at how to make more sustainable and equitable mining practices, I want to know, can you talk to us a little bit more about how mining has impacted the health and well-being of local communities? And then also from the work that you're doing and your perspective, what are some accountability mechanisms that you would recommend to ensure that mining benefits reach local communities?
Thank you, Luko. So I want to start by contextualizing a bit. So Panzi Hospital and Foundation's HQs are in Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu. And we are primarily active in South Kivu, but we also have activities in other provinces, even in other countries where we've implemented the holistic care model. In our region, in the region of South Kivu, we are particularly active in mining communities. A lot of the victims that come to the hospitals and the beneficiaries at the foundation are from those same communities, and the activities in the region. So we have the hospital in Bukavu. We also have one-stop centers in Mulamba, in Bulenga, and we support other one-stop centers. We have mobile clinics. This is how we generally reach the mining communities that are difficult to reach because of the difficult roads. Unfortunately, the armed groups on those roads as well. We also have mobile clinics and mobile courts. So that is, we also bring our lawyers to those communities to address rape cases or other cases that are linked to sexual and gender-based violence. And so again, as I said, it's important to understand that the communities in and around the mines in Eastern DRC are particularly affected by the conflict. But on top of that, universally, the artisanal sector, the artisanal mining sector can have devastating consequences for the health, the safety, and the dignity of the populations, particularly women and children. And so key negative externalities of extractivism that Panzi has sought to address are the health impacts, for example. So that can be the results of toxic exposure. So very often ASM, so artisanal mining involves mercury. So exposing miners and nearby residents to neurotoxic and carcinogenic substances. There is also, I think, Eric mentioned, a consequence of mining can be water and air contamination from tailings or unregulated processing, and that can harm farming. It can harm the drinking water as well. We also have cases of respiratory illnesses, skin disorders, and long-term reproductive harm that are quite common in mining zones. We also have, secondly, prevalence of sexual and gender-based violence. So that is women and girls near mining sites are facing higher risks of rape, of transactional sex, and of trafficking. There are a number of reasons for that, but some of the key reasons are the militarized nature of the mining sites in Eastern Congo and the presence of armed groups in the region. And third, again, those are key impacts, but they are not exclusive. But we have psychosocial and economic impacts on the communities. So the communities endure displacement, land grabbing, and the destruction of substantive livelihoods. We have children that are being pulled from school to be able to be active in the mines. We also have the violent nature of extractivism, so that means the poverty that comes with it, the exploitation, the high risks of the job. So it's important to remember that not only women are victims in those environments, men too. They have to go under the earth sometimes for days to be able to dig. And so they can stay in pits sometimes for 3 days and they risk asphyxia, they risk landsliding. So that will affect family structures and erode the community well-being and the cohesion. You also asked about the... Sorry, could you repeat?
No, sure.
Thank you.
So the other piece that I was asking about are what are some accountability mechanisms that you would recommend to ensure mining benefits reach local communities? And I know a lot of your work is focused on South Kivu and Bukavu, but I think some of these benefits and recommendations could be applied to mining sectors across the country.
True. And I think before I even go there, I wanted to mention maybe also some of the remaining critical challenges that we have in the sector, because there has been a number of improvements in the past years, including the new mining code of 2018 that includes more language around human rights, obligations for companies to do environmental and social impact assessments, for example. There are also clauses that request the companies to do community consultations, even though it's not necessarily aligned with the international standards, or it's not at the level of what the international standards are for the free, prior, and informed consent of communities, but it's better than our 2002 mining codes. We also have, at an international level, we have different due diligence mechanisms and standards that have been implemented or at least set out in the past decade or the past 15 years, actually. And in different countries, we've had adoptions of laws that were implemented so that the companies that were HQ'd in those countries, for example, in France or in Germany, could be pursued for the violation of human rights in those vulnerable communities. But unfortunately, in the DRC, we have some issues with law enforcement. Some companies can easily bypass or ignore the regulation, and they can co-opt or be co-opted by our local officials. The illicit networks are really well organized, and some individuals and groups have been there for such a long time. So for the policymakers or people who are active or actively trying to improve the mining sector in the DRC, it can be challenging because if you have someone in front of you that has been there for 30 years doing what they are doing, obviously that comes with challenges. We also have militarized control of the mine sites that continues. And even though you did mention that the US says that they won't be setting foot in the DRC when it comes to security and militarization, we still have, it's been reported that Eric Prince might be coming in and be active in whatever capacity relating to the securitization of our mines, of our taxes as well, the tax system, which are worrying news when it comes to the militarization of the mines again. We also have impunity that is a critical challenge in the sector. So that is for local officials, for actors like Chris Hubert, John Crowley, who we know have been actively involved in criminal activities in Eastern Congo particularly. We also know that there are still fiscal incentives to smuggle, and there are fiscal incentives or there are clauses for that facilitate tax evasion or tax avoidance. But in Eastern Congo specifically, the issue is the incentives to smuggle, really, when it comes to the three TGs. So the three Ts, the coltan and the gold. It is more profitable for a trader to go through Rwanda and export through Rwanda or Uganda or any neighboring countries, really. Unfortunately, to export gold formally, legally from the DRC is you won't even reach your break even. So incentives like that are obviously to be addressed. And I wanted to set that scene to then talk about the accountability mechanisms, because the first step would be to eliminate the incentives to be corrupted or to participate to corruption, to participate to smuggling. And that leads me to say that what we would recommend are comprehensive tax reforms. For example, an alignment of the taxes in the region. So Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo, for example, having similar taxes. Obviously, it's more complicated than that because for Rwanda, it's also very simple for you to export, right? You go, you have online systems that are working for you. You don't have to go through 11 different ministers to deal with your, and that is for the artisanal mining sector. But again, to set the scene, it's a very important aspect of the mining sector, even where you have industrialization. And Lukogho, I can see that maybe you're trying to cut me a little bit because of the time, but I'll just finish there. We also would recommend independent community monitoring bodies. So there has been some initiatives that were donor funded that were going towards the training of mining communities in responsible sourcing, but also for the communities to learn about due diligence mechanisms, for the communities to be able to do their own risk assessment and management in those terms. So we would encourage more of those, more training in responsible sourcing, more training in mineral ownership and trainings of that level, and also more transformation, obviously, in the region and more inclusion for women and girls in the sector.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I know it's hard because we have an hour, so I wanted to make sure that we got some of your perspectives from the civil society, but also wanted to make sure that we can also hear from our two other panelists before we open it up for questions from the audience and from folks who are participating in the webinar today. And so that local perspective is very helpful, and especially as there's going to be more interest about mining across the country. I know right now the East, the Northeast, and the Southeast are kind of a little bit in a flux, but we know that we'll be seeing more activity and more interest. And so, Tomisi, you as one of the co-founders of Ujengo Labs and Okapi Mobile, one of the exciting things is the fact that we know that there's a lot of extractive activities that happen in Congo, but very rarely do we hear of examples or situations where Congolese are actually able to capitalize on our own critical resources and bring it to the global economy. And so wanted to hear from you, given the DRC's position as a global hub for critical minerals like cobalt and coltan, how is Okapi Mobile adjusting its value chain strategy to perform against foreign competitors while communicating Congo's importance?
Well, thanks for that question, and thanks for allowing me to kind of discuss today. I think it's the first thing I'll say what's unique about our value proposition. Well, the viewpoint of Congolese contribution in this space is to be the extractor of the material. We're coming in from an angle, understanding that if you think about any technology product, I'll say like a phone that's worth $500, the value that's generated in the Congolese economy is possibly $1 of that total value chain. So copy standpoint, I think the professor understands that we need to uplift our role in the value chain to be able to, one, create roles that allows us to play in those other spaces, from design, from technology producers, from software development and others areas. So I think that's the change that we're trying to bring to this space, and I'm really excited to be part of it. And the last, I'll add on that, I think the area that where we think we can do better for our population, that notion, if you're producing $1 of the value and then having consumed $500, how do we narrow that to start? From a standpoint, how do we create technology that are more efficient? As phones are, I think consumer will want phones, more cost-effective phones, and all those things while maintaining technology. That's where Colton is super cool. Helps harmonize the technologies, the assumptions of the softwares that will keep being added there. So the professor, from a design perspective, trying to make the best cost-effective phone that provides all those features, so Congolese themselves can consume them at an appropriate price point. So those entrepreneurs, those business folks that need all this technology to grow our economy, super vital. So, and just to kind of wrap up on this point, I think also being able to include Congolese in this conversation. What is your brand here, right? We consume Apple, we consume all these other products. We gain for having our own brand, supporting our own brand, and having those brands be able to consume other African countries. Right now, we have the Okapi product consumed in about 50 different countries, Nigeria, and that's very intentional, right? Okapi is our national animal. It's very unique to our country. So we want to be intentional in the marketplace to position folks see us going forward in the market as being part of the end value chain versus the raw materials provider. So that's a little bit my time Sankara push there, but consuming Okapi is part of that long.
No, thank you for that. And for people who are interested, I mean, this is a little bit of a shameless plug. I know that Okapi, you can purchase Okapi Mobile's products directly from their website, and also, I believe, through Walmart and some other suppliers as well, if you're in the US. So definitely take a look at that, as we want to be able to promote and support Congolese industry, especially as you're kind of expanding the supply chain for Congolese actors to not only just have this extractive moment, but to really be giving back to local society. And now for Bo, I know we started out talking about kind of what the US DRC perspective is. You are at Micron, which is heavily involved in the semiconductor industry. And so I want to hear from you in terms of like the geopolitical developments in the DRC and the African Great Lakes regions. How does that influence the semiconductor industry dynamics and Micron's strategic planning?
Hey, thanks. And thanks for having me here. Just for, background, Micron is an American semiconductor company. We're headquartered out of Boise, Idaho. We're the second largest semiconductor company in the US and the fourth largest in the world, and are proud to have technology leadership in memory semiconductor chips. And um, uh, you know, currently have about $140 billion that we're investing here in the US to bring back leading edge memory fabs here in the US. And so, we've been encouraged by what this administration has been doing and amplifying partnerships between the US, the DRC, and Rwanda, which could have significant impacts on how to build up supply chains that are crucial to making sure that we're actually able to build advanced manufacturing here in the US. As folks know, whether it's the semiconductor industry, the advanced battery manufacturing, need a stable sourced supply chain of critical minerals to make sure that we are able to produce uh, our advanced manufacturing and in my case, memory and storage production. And so having a diversified supply chain is critically important. And as regional partnerships between the U.S. and African countries, increase. It is helpful for us when we see these initiatives, transparency increased and traceability in terms of where we're able to get our rare earth minerals.
And I just wanted to kind of follow up on that because I know Micron is more so rare earth minerals is Micron's priorities versus some of the other minerals that are in the DRC, but that doesn't mean that the DRC is not on Micron's eye in terms of sourcing other resources, but wanted to kind of get from you how might developments in DRC's mineral extraction affect the global semiconductor supply chain and Micron's sourcing strategies?
Yeah, so we're always looking to ensure that we have a diverse sourcing strategy. And so whether that's, cobalt or tin or any of the other critical or rare earth minerals that might be found in the DRC, the improving the extraction process and output would definitely be beneficial to stabilizing the global supply chain and reducing the cost of materials, which then improves our margins as to build one fab in the US, you need to invest $10 billion before you see $1 of revenue. And so these partnerships again allow for us it aligns with where Micron's interests are in terms of, and the semiconductor interests in terms of securing a transparent, stable supply chain. And it also allows for the DRC to build capacity. And that capacity also helps all advanced manufacturers being able to de-risk and diversify their strategy, which is critical to our building of advanced manufacturing.
Thank you for that. Now, we have a couple questions that are in the chat. So I'm going to kick it here. And for folks who are watching, if you do have questions, feel free to use the Q&A option or to call it out in the chat form, and then we'll try and make sure that we can answer your questions. So we have one question here, and I think probably this might be Eric, if you're still on. Someone wants to know what went wrong with the previous deal signed by the former Congolese administration with China. From their understanding, they said that the deal was supposed to garner infrastructure for raw material. What can be learned from that so that the same maybe downfalls are not experienced this time around? And so just to clarify, this person is wanting to know what are some maybe learning lessons around previous mining deals that were signed under the former Kabila administration that maybe the current administration by Tshisekedi should be considering, President Tshisekedi versus President Kabila. If you're...
Well, Yves, I'm sorry, I think you're going to have to respond for me. But the only thing I can think of right away is, because I'm a finance guy, is about valuation. From what I recall, the deal that was signed with the Chinese was not made 100% public. So I'm not sure exactly what was part of that deal. But from through the grapevine, I think that the idea was to have, like you said, an exchange of natural resources versus infrastructure. But it's very important in this kind of conversation to know exactly what you want, to be specific, and you can't give billions of tons of iron ore, for instance, to someone who's going to give you 2 or 3 bridges. That would be ridiculous. And as you know, the price of the commodity evolves throughout time. So it's important to once again to know what the sort of that end of the deal is to bargain properly. I'm not sure we did that homework properly at that time. And when I hear that we want we're putting together a deal with the US today, I think it can be a fantastic time to have a reset. And but it will work only if we do that homework, if we talk about proper valuation, if we know what we want in terms of, in this case, it's security. I heard that it was Mr. Prince is the guy that would be participating in that. I don't know him. I've just researched a little bit the net, and I'm not really sure that I understand fully what his offering will be. Yves, maybe you have more insight.
I don't have details. I think I will respond exactly like you. We didn't have the whole detail of what was signed before. And I believe also, when you do such a deal, you need to be crystal clear on what you really want and what you're exchanging, and you have value for value. Okay. And I think on the Congolese side as well, I may say lack of planning. When you do infrastructure, you need to planify it properly to make sure that you are getting the real value of what you are giving on the other side. I do believe that was not done properly. And even if they were planned, they didn't use the money that was given to them to, at least for the Congolese side, to follow up. And I think Chinese got what they want, but we didn't get what we want. But this time, I think it's an opportunity for us to do it well. It's an opportunity to really put on the table, what do we want in exchange? And I can see some sign that there's in the current dynamic that we also want Congolese to be part of the chain of production, and how you call it, transformation, and also, as Tomisi was saying, we are trying to push as much as possible more transformation of mineral in the country. That can help as well. But on the other side, there are some critical mineral that US wants, and we need just to make sure that, it's we know what we want, and we exchange exactly what we are going to get. So let's see. For now, we don't have details. A few things are transpiring, but I pray that it will be good this time.
Well, thank you both for that. This question is for Tomisi. So someone wants to know, from your perspective, what type of policies could I'm assuming the Congolese government undertake to support the growth of Okapi? Well, actually, let's take it twofold. Let's say the Congolese and the US government to help support the growth of Okapi.
I'll start on the Congolese side. I think the first thing, and there's some activity underway, is if you look at the US, all the police vehicles are they're Ford or GM. So being intentional how we partner on the needs of the government. So we didn't release it, but I think it was leaked through some of the social media aspect. But we have partnered with aspects of the military to provide technology that allows them to communicate through satellite phones. So, and that's an aspect that supports the country's national interest by providing encrypted products that meet their needs, right? So that's one element. So how do we partner from a business to business perspective? The second element is we have aspirations to move towards production and local manufacturing. I think Eric talked a ton about the infrastructure challenges, but even there's an interim steps there. Like, how do we get to local assembly? So that would require at least being able to negotiate fair import. We don't have all the materials, right? How does the government allow companies like ours import the necessary materials at a reasonable rate, so we can then be able to develop localized assembly plants that provides an advantage to do it underground. So I would say like those are two aspects of the Congolese government side. So on the U.S. side, I think Okapi's trademark in the U.S. I think there's that provide some securities there, but we're all Congolese in the project. So that's helpful from a legal perspective around protecting trademarks. So one of the issues that exists in the content is trademarks and proprietary protections, right? The government, I think for all innovation going forward, that is an element where the Congolese government will need to start looking harder. How do you protect proprietary technology? Like we have confidence being trademark US that we can send and print in other domestic markets, but can you do that in the localized market and your trademark and your intellectual property will be protected? So that's an element I think the US government will help.
Thank you for that. This question is for Nicole. So we have someone here who is wanting to know, how can a US-based like energy policy student find opportunities to work or to better understand and work in the Congolese mining and energy sector? I think that's actually kind of maybe for you and for Yves. And then also they wanted to know, as companies like Glencore and like Micron are responding to additional demands when it comes to critical minerals as energy and technology surges forward, how are your various companies balancing humanitarian concerns around the increased demand and economic development in the country? So let's start with maybe Nicole in terms of how folks can come into this mining space, specifically who are learning and wanting to know more about that mining work. And then Yves and Bo, I'll have you all close out with that last question.
So I think there is obviously a range of policies that will concern the mining sector specifically. You can look at policies that would be more geared towards the protection of women and children in the mining ecosystem, for example. There are a few policies that are interesting to look at to start, which are, for example, how the Congolese government handled the exposure to mercury and the different laws and policies that were implemented around that and the impact that it had on women generally, which was not necessarily the most positive. So looking at this range of policies there, you could also look at policies that are more related to what is happening right now between the US and the DRC mineral deal. So looking at aspects that are missing. If you go on the US government's website, for example, and you type DRC and you look at the different policies that are existing, we have the DRC, the Bridge to DRC Act that was introduced in 2023, but reintroduced last year with an enhanced version. We have different policies as well or acts that concern the Congo that were introduced and that sometimes tied to the sector, the mining sector, but not necessarily giving enough conditions to U.S. actors in relation to responsible sourcing. Right now, really what the Congolese civil society and the Congolese diaspora are pushing for in the U.S. is for it to have a framework around how responsible are those deals going to be? How transparent is it going to be? Unfortunately, Trump also passed the Corruption Act when he dropped all the different executive orders. So there are really a range of issues, but it depends what you want to look at. Exactly. Again, you can look at policies affecting women specifically, children specifically, or responsible sourcing, which I would say right now is the most interesting to look into transparency, look into value addition. How can we create policies around those exact topics to make sure that there is beneficiation in the DRC, that there is transparency both in the US and the DRC? Because again, there is issue on both sides in terms of how our government are handling both the transparency levels, but also the corruption potential in both countries or from both sides.
Thank you. And so the last question, going to kick it back to Yves and to Bo. And again, just for a refresher, how are your respective companies handling essentially or responding to the demands for critical minerals as technology is advancing and moving forward?
Oh, go ahead.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. So yeah, so as I mentioned, we have when it comes, I'll just kind of give some context. When it comes to Africa, we've been encouraged, whether it's in the first Trump administration, discussions around a free trade deal with US, Kenya, the last administration also had, we were able, the State Department, which is still a policy that continues to this day about, how do you bring in more African countries to be able to benefit from ITSE funding, which is critical to it's the International Technology and Innovation Fund, and it really supports the development and adoption of secure semiconductors and semiconductor supply chain. And so what Micron has done is partnered with historically Black and college and universities and other institutions here, along with institutions in Kenya and across the region, to really focus in on where can we invest in workforce initiatives to be able to ensure that we're meeting the scale and demand that's needed for the diversification of not only the supply chain, but also for our advanced manufacturing. And so to your question, as we think about these things, we look at how our country setting, and I think some of the panelists have talked about this today, is around how are they setting up regulatory frameworks? How are they setting up tax incentives? You've seen, whether it's here domestically in the United States, whether it's in Japan or Korea or other countries across the EU, incentives to be able to bring economic development and jobs of the semiconductor industry to their country. And so how are those frameworks being set? And then also, what part of the supply chain are you going after? Here and domestically in the United States, the focus has been on front-end manufacturing, but looking at the whole supply chain. Where are countries, whether that's the DRC or countries across the continent of Africa, where are they focusing on? We've talked to folks across the continent about, is it the rare earth and critical mineral side? Is it more of the back end assembly, test, and packaging where they're setting up their infrastructure? And so we're encouraged by that. We see the demand, especially because of AI. For instance, one NVIDIA GPU that folks talk a lot about, there's actually 96 memory chips, which memory chips are the chips that we make, that go around that. And so we see the demand increasing significantly, and see high bandwidth memory, for example, being it's right now it's a $30 billion industry, and by the end of the decade, it's going to be $100 billion industry. And the sourcing and the framing of how countries across the continent, whether that's the Congo, whether that's Uganda, Kenya, or any other country across the continent, look at how are we setting up frameworks and partnerships with the United States and other countries, is going to be critical for advanced manufacturing companies to look at these places and say, you meet a demand that's needed. You have the workforce there, you have the resources there. Water and energy, as you mentioned, are very key to advanced manufacturing. And so those are all the frameworks really that we're looking for as we look to partner and continue to partner on the continent.
If I may add, how do we respond to the additional demand that is coming? I'll just say by investing on increasing our capacity. And this is what Glencore Group is doing right now in DRC, by the way, with investing in increasing the capacity because of the high demand that is coming up, especially for copper, which come with cobalt, of course. Cobalt export of cobalt was actually frozen by the government of DRC because the price dropped with the oversupply in the international market. DRC supplying almost 60% of the total cobalt, so the price went down. But now the price is coming back, but we need to increase. But as a group, we are investing on increasing capacity in copper production. With our two big mines in DRC, we have Kamoto Copper Company, with the project to start exploring a new open pit. And also in Momi, where there's an expansion by putting a new processing, a sulfide processing, because most of the mineral are actually sulfide on that side, while we have oxide processing. So there's a plan to increase significantly our production of copper, which require investment in technology, investment in equipment, and also people. And one of the missions for people like us who have joined is actually to make sure that we get right Congolese, because the project is for sustainability of that business in Congo. It will be good to start having professional Congolese running that company, owning that company in DRC. That was the mission that we have now. So I'm just using the opportunity. I know we're at the end. One of our mission is just to make sure that we start tapping in the diaspora to look at the Congolese in the mining, in the supply chain that are really ready to join, to come and work, because I think this is now the philosophy of the group, to make sure that the company in DRC is managed, owned by Congolese, and just the ownership belongs to Glencore Group. I may also use the opportunity to address the last question that I've seen there before you close. What's holding Congo raw material refining capability? I think Eric mentioned some infrastructure first, energy too, because we are also struggling like a company now. Increase the capacity to produce copper require doubling the capacity to have access to electricity. And this is a challenge today because even though we have the Inga that have been supplying one of our factories in Lubumbashi, because we inherited from the Jekamin Kamoto concentrator that used to see on the Zaire currency money. But it's not enough. Kamoto, Kamoa, all of us are actually struggling a little bit, and we are working with the government of DRC, I think the minister, to see if we can develop more source of energy that can help to actually improve the production of DRC, especially in the copper side, to meet the global demand. I was saying energy is a challenge, infrastructure is a challenge. I may also say we need to have a policy as a country to be really intentional on organizing the environment for industry that on the transformation side to come and settle in the country, so that we can increase that supply chain of transforming the energy. Today, most of the big companies are going for raw material. On the copper side, we do some level of refining up to the foil of copper. That's what we use to export. And on the cobalt, it's hydroxide of carbon. But we can do further to increase the value in the country. But that requires a government policy, government to work on the business environment to make sure that infrastructure is in place, to make sure that setting a company, it's not a nightmare. Also working on the taxation regime for the country to make the environment attractive for people to invest, Congolese and diaspora. Of course, if all these are put together, I think financial institutions also can help, entrepreneurs like you guys to start investing on that ecosystem. For some of us who have been in the diaspora coming back to this country, I can tell you it's sometimes shocking to see what is in the ground, how we have been blessed by God, by the way. It's just unbelievable. I attended my first meeting in Glencore where they're saying, the tenor of copper, in the mineral in South America. It's about 1%, as Eric was saying. In DRC, in some of the mining, it's up to 6%. Okay? But as a business, if you run a business in Chile or in Peru, it may be more profitable than in DRC, because in DRC, the cost of running the business can be just, expensive in terms of getting the license, in terms of running your business, in terms of managing the tax, in terms of also how do you export what we have produced, because it's quite far from the coast, and you need to export through Dar es Salaam, through Zambia, sometimes to South Africa. So those are the things that if we work on infrastructure as a country, I think that country is the game changer.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for those last words. And I realized I did not introduce myself at the beginning, but before I do that, I want to thank each and every single one of you all for participating today. I know we could not get to all of the questions and address them, but one thing that we're trying to do is be able to provide answers after the fact. So we might reach out to see if you all have some additional feedback or commentary that you want to provide, so that we can then provide that summary to folks who were not able to watch this today. This will be on YouTube. So for folks who participated here, you can definitely share the link with anyone after the fact. I'm Lukogho Kasomo, one of the co-founders. Our next Congo chat is going to be on July 26th, and it's going to be focused on the agriculture sector. And so we'll be learning about import and export processes in Congo, and would love for all of you all to come back for that. And then also definitely stay tuned. We are developing some things. We know that there's a lot of interest in people learning more about mining and kind of learning more about the capacity. So we're working on our next Return to Congo edition to kind of have some input on that. So please follow us, continue to follow us on all of the social media platforms. And all of these individuals are also on LinkedIn if you have additional questions that they were not able to address here.